Hey there, this video is going to be all about why I think the Nikon Z mount is the best mount out there. Now, the main reason for this is the insane adaptability of this mount. Now, most of you watching this know that you can adapt a lot of lenses to mirrorless cameras like, DSLR lenses, cinema lenses like EF mount, F mount, PL mount, those sorts of things. But one of the coolest things about Nikon is that you can actually adapt mirrorless lenses, not just any mirrorless lenses, Sony E mount mirrorless lenses, because E mount collection is so massive. Now, so what you're looking at right here, this is actually a E mount lens. It's not even a Sony branded lens, it's a Sigma lens. And I have this mounted on the Z8 and the autofocus is working really well. So stick around, and in this video I'm going to talk about, again, why I think the Z mount is so awesome, talk about flange distance and different adapters and all that sort of stuff. All right, let's go. So I know I was just talking about the amazing adaptability of the Z mount, but I also want to mention that Nikon makes fantastic lenses on their own. So if you are a Nikon shooter or thinking about investing in the Nikon system, keep in mind Nikon makes amazing lenses. And I do own a few, two of which are right here. I have the 24-70 2.8 and the 50 1.8. All of the lenses I've used from Nikon have been really, really nice. So, like I said, Nikon, in my opinion, is the most adaptable lens out there, including adapting other mirrorless lenses, which is really cool. Now, I personally own a lot of EF lenses from companies like Zeiss. I own some classics and Otis. I also have a bunch of Sigma EF glass, including the lens I'm shooting right now is the Sigma EF 28mm lens. And the reason I've invested in EF glass so much is that I can adapt them to anything. Sony, Canon, Nikon, Blackmagic, Lumix, Fuji. Yes, I own adapters for all of these cameras because I'm a complete camera nerd. And for this channel, I do test out cameras from all these different companies. So for me, when I invest in lenses, it's really nice to be able to use them on all the different cameras. And I do recommend for a lot of people that if they are switching between different brands or, buying lenses and using them on different cameras or kind of want to be more future-proof, I do recommend investing in EF or PL lenses because they're so easily adaptable to any mirrorless system. So having lenses that you can adapt is super handy. Of course, you don't get all the benefits of native lenses, but being able to use them on multiple systems is really great. Now, before we get further down the line of talking about adapting lenses, we do need to talk about flange distance. So what is flange distance? Flange distance is the distance from the mounting flange, which is the metal rings on the back of the lens, to the sensor or film if you're shooting film. You can often adapt lenses with a large flange distance onto a mount with a shorter flange distance. And the way that works is by putting in an adapter. Now, I'm going to be talking about adapters in this video that don't have optical elements in them. There are some adapters out there that do have optics in them to make them work. We're not going to be talking about them in this video. I'm also not going to be talking about focal reducers, also known as speed boosters here. But if you're interested in learning more about those, I did make a detailed video about speed boosters, and I will leave that video linked down below. All right, so here's a list of some of the common mounts and their flange distances. And you can see at the top of the list here, the shortest flange distance is the Nikon Z mount at 16 millimeters. Now, most of the mirrorless mounts you can see are between 18 and 20 millimeters. And so that was one of the things about mirrorless cameras is you can get the back of the lens closer to the sensor, which has benefits optically. Now, you can also see here the reason why you can adapt things like Sony E to Nikon Z is because the E mount the lens has to be further out, so you have that ability to put an adapter in there. Now, it should theoretically be possible to adapt other mirrorless mounts to Nikon Z, and I'm not sure the technical reasons why they're not. Maybe the Canon system, maybe they're not like opening up the RF system to allow people to do that, which could make sense because they just recently let Sigma make RF lenses for APS-C cameras. Maybe there's technical differences between the size of the hole or other restrictions. I'm not really sure. Now, going down the list a little bit further, we have the Leica M mount, which is sort of a mirrorless mount, but really it's a rangefinder style camera for the Leica M cameras. And so those are have a little bit longer flange distance. So you can actually adapt those to all the mirrorless mounts, which I've done before, and I have a lot of those adapters. And then below that, you have the DSLR and cinema lenses. So like Canon EF, Nikon F, like R and PL, going from 44 millimeters and up. So that is the reason why, lenses, like I said, like EF and PL, you can adapt those to anything because the flange distance is so much longer, you can adapt them to any of the mirrorless cameras. Next, we'll talk about adapters. And this is the adapter that I was using at the beginning of the video to adapt an E mount lens to my Nikon Z8. This is from a company called Megadap, and I bought this a little while ago, and I was really excited to finally be able to test it out. Now, there are a few other companies that make a E to Z mount adapter, and I haven't tried them, and I haven't fully tested this out because I just tried this combination here. But from my experience, it's pretty promising. I think it would work pretty well with a lot of other lenses. You know, your mileage may vary depending on the camera and lens and all that sort of stuff. I do really like the build quality on this. It's mostly metal. It does feel really solid. It also has all the electronic contacts for electronic information, and also, like I was showing you before, with the autofocus. And what's really cool besides the build quality and the functionality is that it's super thin. Now, the reason why it's so thin, again, it has to do with the flange distance. Sony E mount, which is the lens to go on this side, is 18 millimeters, and Nikon Z is 16 millimeters. So it only has to push the lens out by 2 millimeters, resulting in a very thin adapter. And when you mount this on the camera, it almost feels like a native mount. It's really cool. I'm gonna mount this on the camera, but let me talk about the lens I was shooting that intro with for a second. This is the Sigma 18-50 f2.8 for E-mount, and this is actually an APS-C lens, but the reason I have this is that this is on loan from B&H Photo for testing out a different camera. So huge thank you to B&H for letting me borrow this and making videos like this possible. They've been a huge supporter of me and the channel. So if you're looking to pick up some camera gear, go check out B&H. That's where I buy most of my stuff from. I can't recommend enough. So again, this is an APS-C lens on a full frame camera, but that's what I have. I don't currently have a full frame Sony lens, but seems to work really well like I showed you. All right, so let's mount the Megadap adapter on the Z8 so I can show you how cool this is. So like I said, it does have really good build quality and mounts on really well. It's nice and stiff and very satisfying. Look at how thin that is. This really acts, like I said, like a native mount once you have it on there because it's so thin. And we can mount this Sigma lens on here to show you what that looks like. And you can see that it almost looks like a native mount, and it pretty much acts that way as well. So really, really cool. All right, let's talk about some of the other adapters here. I have a few that I own personally. First of which is the Fringer, I never know how to pronounce it. This is the EF to NZ Mark II. This is going from EF to Nikon Z. I use this one all the time, like I said, with my Zeiss and Sigma lenses. So really handy to have that if you have any EF glass. So that's that one. The next one is going to be, I have an M to Z mount adapter from a company called Metabones. Metabones, in my opinion, makes pretty good quality stuff. This is pretty heavy duty and mounts really well. I have this in a few other mounts as well, going from M to other different mounts. So I like these. And lastly, the one cool thing, if you are adapting lenses like EF, PL, and those sorts of things, is because there's such a difference in flange distance from, let's say, EF to Nikon Z, you have the ability to use the adapters that have built-in filters. So this is one from a company called Mikey, and this one you can see here that has a drop-in filter. Now, most of you are probably familiar with this for like Canon because a lot of people use the EF to RF adapter with the VND in it. But Mikey makes them for other systems. This one here is for EF to E mount, but I do believe they also make one from EF to Z. So there's lots of different options out there, and it's really nice to be able to, you know, put a VND in there if you're using different, you know, DSLR lenses or cinema lenses. I also think Mofage makes one for PL lenses that you can adapt to all the different mirrorless systems too. So if you own those sort of lenses, you have lots of ability to adapt it from E mount mirrorless lenses to EF, F, PL, all that kind of stuff. The Nikon Z mount is so flexible. Lastly, I want to take a few minutes to talk about RED cameras. Most of you watching this know that Nikon acquired RED, and it'll be really interesting to see how Nikon incorporates the Z mount into potential future RED cameras. So we got to talk about the RF mount. And the way I understand this was that the RF mount was basically put into the RED cameras as a way to get a fairly flexible mount for adapting other lenses. Like I said in this video, when you have a mirrorless camera, you can easily adapt a lot of different lenses, M, EF, PL, etc. Now, when the OG Komodo came out, that was RED's first camera with an RF mount. It didn't even support proper operation of Canon RF lenses. So you could mount the RF lens on there, but they couldn't talk to each other well. And that's actually why when they first shipped out the OG Komodo, it came with the RF to EF adapter, because it did communicate with the EF lenses, but not the RF lenses. So basically, the way I understand it is, it was basically a mount on there so you could adapt to other things. Now, the Canon RF lenses do properly work on RED cameras, but now that Sigma has brought out some RF mount lenses, those aren't communicating properly with the Red cameras. At the time of recording this, it might get fixed in the future with a firmware update, but as of right now, I don't think they are communicating with each other. So it would be really cool to see a Z mount on a Red camera, because you could use Z lenses, E lenses, M, EF, PL, etc. I think it would open up even more options. So that would be really cool. And I know that a lot of videographers and filmmakers out there do own Sony cameras and do have a lot of E mount glass. So that would be a really cool selling feature to be able to adapt those lenses onto future, Red cameras, and of course currently on the, the Z mount cameras. Anyways, Nikon Z mount, incredibly flexible, and of course Nikon makes great lenses, like I said before. If you enjoyed this, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.